As many of you know, the SAT is going digital, and one of the changes that I'm most curious about is understanding what's going to happen in terms of material you guys have to prep for the exam and whether you have access to your release tests. The College Board has announced that there will be no QAS for the new SAT. But what does that mean when there are truth in testing laws in places like New York and California that require standardized test makers to reveal the questions that you personally have taken on an exam for a standardized test? In this video, I'm going to pick apart the law. We're going to dive in and figure out some predictions on what might happen now that the test has gone digital. My name is Brooke. I have been coaching the SAT as well as the ACT for over a decade and a half. I've scored perfectly on it as an adult. I've coached students to perfect scores on the SAT and the ACT. I have 2 courses online for both the SAT and the ACT that have helped students score in 99th percentile scores or even perfect scores on the ACT. I also have a couple of books for the ACT math section that you can find at Amazon.com. You can find us here on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on TikTok. And be sure to subscribe to our channel and our mailing list if you haven't yet. Cool. One of the greatest tools to prep for the current versions of the SAT and the ACT are released actual exams from the test makers. For the SAT, these are generally called QASs, or question and answer service. So the reason that the College Board is not going to be releasing QAS tests, as many of you may know, is that the test is going to be adaptive. What that means is as you take the test, you're going to take one section, right? And you do the questions in that section, and depending on your performance in that section, if you do really well, you'll get banded to a higher band. If you do poorly, you might get banded to a lower band. And then you're going to get a different version of the second half of that section that is banded to your predictive kind of shelf or level academically. Given that circumstance, the College Board is going to be pulling from a pool of questions rather than having a single test form for every standardized test, right? And the deal is they're trying to mix up the testing items so that the kid sitting next to you doesn't have the same question you have. In this predicament where we're using this test bank, the challenge becomes, because so much money was spent developing that test bank, they need to reuse these items date after date after date on different test dates with different students over time. So because the College Board wants to recycle lots of questions, they don't want to release them and give them away to everybody because then they can't reuse them. So that's where this came from. Now, when I first initially heard this news, I said, but what about truth in testing laws, right? The whole reason that the SAT began releasing tests in the first place, it didn't used to at all before 1980, by the way. The whole reason that they began to release these tests is that there was legislation in both New York and California that got passed that required standardized test makers to release exams that they were giving to students so that students could see what kind of items make up this exam, right? I want to be able to see sample examples of these tests, and I want to see actual tests that were given on test day. I want to see those released so that I can go over my answers so that I can understand what I got wrong, right? So that was really the turning point. And essentially the College Board said, you know what, if we're going to go through with this, we're just going to make this a national policy. We're not just going to do it in California and New York, right? And so ho-hum, the College Board began to release exams. In terms of releasing all that material for the new test, are these laws going to protect at least students in California or New York at all? That's the question that I'm asking, especially as somebody who teaches in the state of California. So what I did for this video is I looked up the laws in these 2 states, the truth in testing laws, and deciphered them and have interpreted them on my own terms in terms of how this might intersect with the new SAT and also predict what might happen going forward. Now, caveat, I am not a lawyer and this is not legal advice. Cool? Cool. All right, so first let's talk about truth in testing laws in California. Now, unlike New York, the California law only applies to tests that are required for undergraduate studies and only to tests that are required by institutions of higher learning in California. Now, with the whole test optional situation right now, I'm sure the College Board wants to go back to a situation where everyone is requiring the test. So my guess is, even if these are not required in California, the College Board will probably want to inspire some institutions to go back to requiring the test, and so they will continue to comply with this law to the best of their ability, right? You would think? Cool. So the Truth in Testing California law basically says that 50% of regular administrations for the exam need to be disclosed. But, and this is what I didn't know, they can be disclosed in one of 2 ways. The first way is the way that we all know and love, called releasing a QAS. But there's another way. And this, to me, is the loophole that the College Board is probably going to use as it moves to computerized test. And that is that in the state of California, 50% of regular administrations of the exam would need to release testing materials to the individual test taker of the test that they exactly took, so they don't have to release all the questions, just the questions that that person saw, in a closely monitored condition situation within 90 days of the test. And if the College Board provides that opportunity, you do not get to keep a copy of the test and take it home with you. And my guess is that is probably how the College Board is going to handle testing in California, and they are going to hope and pray that not very many California students burden them with coming and looking at all of their testing items. Now, we've actually already seen the state of California do this when it comes to the December 2021 SAT. In a released document from the College Board, it has been stated that students in California had a right to review their test questions under secure conditions at the ETS Western Field Office in Sacramento by calling a particular phone number. Now, I'm not sure if this footnote is the only way that you can receive a copy or see a copy of your test in California, but let's be honest, if you're a student in San Diego or Los Angeles, hopping on a plane or hopping in the car and heading up to Sacramento isn't that easy, right? Like, how many hours of a drive is that? So that's kind of ridiculous. I'm not sure if that's how the College Board plans to administer truth in testing compliance with the new SAT. If it is, it seems a little dodgy and problematic. But there you go. That's what the College Board has done in the past. Now, when it comes to New York State, different story. So again, in New York State, the truth in testing laws expand not only to tests that are used in undergraduate admissions, but also those that are used in graduate school admissions. So that means it applies to tests like the MCAT, the GRE, and these other tests have been digital for a while. So we know how these laws have played out with those exams, and that can give us more predictive power in terms of how the College Board might handle this particular law and the circumstances of using an entire test bank. So right now, the GRE offers a question and answer review service to students in New York State only for $50. And what you have to do is, during one of 8 weeks that they have set up throughout the year, you have to make an appointment to go and review your exam. That's probably what's coming to New York. The New York law has a lot of carve-outs also. For example, the New York law carves out that the SAT-1 only has to disclose 4 test sittings instead of all of the test sittings. It also, in the past, exempted the SAT-2, which recycled items over and over again in its test forms and was taken by fewer students. And finally, the state of New York also provided many carve-outs when the GRE went to a computerized exam between 1994 and 1999 that allowed the test makers to disclose no items for a period of 2 years. So the other prediction I have is that there could be some negotiation with ETS or the College Board and the state of New York to try to carve out some sort of transition period as they move to a computerized exam, rather than letting students go in and review their items. In any case, there you have it. The College Board, I would predict, given the law and given what's available, is probably going to make available for students, possibly in an incredibly difficult manner by traveling to Sacramento in California, we don't know yet, or possibly in an easier manner, such as the way that the GRE is reviewed in the state of New York, a way for students in those states to review their particular tests and their particular items, but it will be in a secured environment and they're not going to be able to take those home and share them. So what does that mean for you guys? It means that you're not going to have a robust repository of free study materials above and beyond what is offered at Khan Academy. It's going to reduce the amount of material that you're going to have to prep for the SAT, especially in early years and possibly in the long run, depending on what the College Board decides to release over time. It also means that over time, even if the College Board gets up to 8 tests, which is what it has now on Khan Academy, you're not going to be able to be that super prepper where you do official tests, into the 20s, right? So it's going to make it harder to practice intensely for the test. It's going to make it harder to get a perfect score on the test. And it is changing the landscape of how you can prep and who has access to prep materials. Chances are, if you really want to prep for this test, you're going to have to purchase more materials that are created by other test prep organizations in addition to the College Board if you want to be as prepared as possible. So what do you think of this? What are your thoughts? Do you have any predictions I didn't think of? If so, put them in the comments below. I hope you guys like this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.